He reported me for parking wrong, but his driveway led to a secret bunker. I'd been in the house 3 days. The moving truck scuffed the curb, the couch wouldn't fit through the front door without the legs removed, and the welcome basket from the HOA had a laminated insert about community standards, tucked beneath the homemade cookies like a cease and desist under a casserole. I used to think I was a rules guy. Rules meant structure, predictability. That was before the neighborhood's rules started writing back. I parked on my side of the street with the back end of my hatch overhanging the stop line by maybe a foot. It was late, after 9. I told myself I'd fix it in the morning. Morning fixed it for me. The first thing I saw when I opened the door was a pink slip snug under my wiper, the kind of fluorescent you can see from space. The second thing was a chalk mark on my rear tire, neat as a surgeon's first incision. The third thing was the man across the street, arms folded, belt buckled like a badge. Graham Aldridge. He didn't wave. He smiled the way a locksmith does when he knows your door and you don't. "Good morning," he said, crossing with that forward-leaning stride ex-cops use, even if they were only ever mall security. "You must be the new one, Evan?" He'd somehow learned my name before I'd learned the trash day. "Ivan," I corrected. He absorbed it like an entrance exam answer he'd grade later. "You're over the setback line," he said, crouching to demonstrate how chalk attends sin. "Not a lot, but enough to block sight around the corner. Lot of kids ride scooters. We try to be mindful." He said "we" and "mindful" like a court summons. "And a mindfulness app had a baby." "I'll move it," I said. "It's already handled," he said, flicking the ticket. "First is a warning. The second is a fine. HOA bylaws, section 7.4b. Katie will go over it at the meeting tonight. We like to get everyone oriented." He patted the hood, and in the flat of his palm on the steel, I heard something I couldn't name yet. Not a threat. More like a suggestion that could lift. He left. I moved the car. On my tire, a faint white code remained. A thin line across the tread like a scratch in a record. I rubbed at it, then didn't. It felt like scrubbing a fingerprint off a glass while someone watched. The HOA meeting was in the community room behind the mailboxes. A beige cave with a coffee urn that brewed bitterness in bulk, and stackable chairs that flexed if you were heavier than a ghost. Katie, the HOA president, had the exhausted kindness of a kindergarten teacher in flu season. She welcomed me, thanked me for choosing Maple Court, reminded everyone pool keys were for residents only, and then without looking at notes recited the parking regulations while her eyes floated to Graham. "Enforcement is a partnership," she said. "We're lucky to have neighbors who care." 0 incidents for 4 months. People clapped like she'd announced rain. When she opened the floor, Graham stood and, with the relish of a magician producing his own regulations from a hat, read the sections about setbacks, sightlines, and curb radiuses. He didn't read so much as declaim. When he finished, he turned to me like a doctor checking whether the patient had woken during surgery. "I get it," I said to the room more than to him. "I'll measure before I sleep next time." Laughter, polite, the kind that forgives you in public and holds your name in its teeth in private. The rest was budget and pool resurfacing, and whether the gazebo lights were attracting moths or teenagers. I walked home with the feeling of a thin film on my skin, like I'd stood near a fryer and come away with grease. The porch light I hadn't replaced yet made the whole house look like a theater set where the actors had gone on break. That night, the wind shifted, and every scent the neighborhood had went to my side. Fertilizer, someone's laundry detergent, the medicinal stink of a recently wiped countertop. Under it all, dim and regular, I heard a hum. Not insects, not the air conditioner cycles you learn after a week. This was lower, more patient, like a boat engine idling, or a refrigerator the size of a room taking breath. When I stepped out onto the porch, it was louder. I followed the sound driveway to driveway and stopped across from Graham's. His concrete was the kind people get when they plan to take photos of it. Swept, edged, a pale, clean slab with a faint stipple that made the tiny stones pop. I put my hand out, stupidly, like you do to a horse. The surface was warmer than the night air. A thin line of moisture beaded along the expansion joint and slid down. I told myself it was nothing. Stored heat, bad drainage. The hum followed. Mr. Whitaker's mutt across the cul-de-sac, half beagle, half something that had made a bad deal, started a low growl. He was too old to fake it. He stared into the same dark as me and told it what he thought. I lifted my hand off the concrete, and the hum didn't change, like a heartbeat that belonged to the street rather than the thing I touched. The second day, a package vanished from the duplex at the corner. The next, a bike leaned against a porch in the morning was lying on its side in the evening with the front wheel spun, to face the house like it had tried to return. These aren't crimes, I told myself. These are frictions. Still, when I pulled into my driveway, I aligned the nose of the car with ridiculous precision, backing and adjusting until a laser in my head buzzed green. In my mailbox, a newsletter about community watch, a flyer for gutter cleaning, An envelope addressed to Graham with a civil contractor's logo peeking at me through the window like a tongue. I put it back and shut the metal door as if I were closing an animal's mouth. The third night, at 2:14 a.m., according to the red digits on my microwave because I was in the kitchen drinking water and pretending that counted as sleep, the hum dipped. I went outside barefoot. The asphalt was cool. I kept to the shadows like a teenager who shouldn't be seen, and told myself I was checking sprinklers. The air had that iron taste it gets before rain. I stood at the lip of Graham's drive. The warmth had bled off, but the smell remained. A clean, bitter note like bleach braided with something oily. Across the way, a motion sensor clicked, and the cul-de-sac lit in segments. One porch, then another, like white cards turning over on a table. I took 2 steps onto the drive and heard a crisp sound behind me. The hitch of a dog's inhale before a bark. I turned. Whitaker's mutt stared over my shoulder at the concrete as if the slab had said his name. He didn't bark. He whined. I backed away, suddenly aware how ridiculous and how illegal it would be if a neighbor's camera caught me casing another neighbor's driveway. I went home and watched a video of someone making pasta and tasted nothing. In the morning, there was a photo in the HOA group chat. My car from the night of the ticket, taken low. Too low for a person kneeling unless their knees were under the curb. The caption, anonymous, said, "Setback violations increase collision risk. Remember, we're all responsible." Katie posted a heart. 3 people thanked the anonymous poster for raising awareness. I typed and deleted 4 different versions of "Get a Life." I told myself not to feed a fire I couldn't even see because it was beneath the floorboards. I installed a dash cam pointed out my front window anyway. Pretended it was about safety. Really, it was about collecting a kind of power that felt like proof, even if I didn't know what it would prove. The memory card icon pulsed like a metronome. I drank my coffee by the front window so much I felt like the house would dent under my weight if I shifted. The day darkened early. The clouds stacked like furniture. By nightfall, the streetlights put halos on the blacktop. At 2-something again, the hum rose and dipped, like someone testing a throttle. I checked the dash cam in the morning and found a smear of footage. A shadow crossing, a reflection that bent like heat above a grill, a shape that did and didn't look like a man. At 3:12, a dark figure walked up Graham's driveway, reached the square within the apron, and then the next frame was empty concrete, no turnoff, no bush to hide behind. The figure had been there and then hadn't. The camera had skipped a second, then 5, then 10, and when it resumed, the driveway was wet as if a hand had been pressed to it and pulled away. By then, I'd learned the way attention changes a body. I moved through the house like someone staying in a hotel that might call them at any moment with a message they didn't expect. My girlfriend, Maya, FaceTimed from the city and asked if I was happy. I told her I was fine, which is a word with no nutritional value. She doesn't like confrontation. She moved twice as a kid because of neighbors who played music too loud and parents who refused to take them on in any way except through the police. "Please don't become one of those people who memorizes bylaws," she said, laughing. "Promise you won't fight your entire street." "I won't," I said, and the word hung between us like a picture slightly crooked, daring me not to fix it. The storm hit that afternoon. The gutters sang. The curb ran like a small, disciplined river. I watched rain stripe the driveways into territories and did not step outside. When it passed at midnight, the air smelled like rinsed metal. I opened my door to breathe it and nearly stepped on the envelope. It was cheap, unsealed, the kind of stationary motels use for "Tell us about your stay." Inside, a single glossy 4x6. The low-angle shot of my front bumper from the night of the ticket. Raindrops fat on the lens, the reflective paint glowing like a grin. Across the back, in block letters printed neat as chalk, "You're already on the list." I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The photo lay face down on my counter like a confession I wasn't ready to read again. At 4 in the morning, I gave up, made coffee that tasted like soil, and sat by the window with the dash cam card slotted into my laptop. I fast-forwarded through 8 hours of nothing. Mailmen, passing cars, the flutter of leaves, until at exactly 2:13 a.m., the recording stuttered. A frame of empty concrete, then a smear, then the faint outline of Graham himself in a heavy coat, slipping into the darkness along his own driveway. The next frame, gone. Just wet pavement reflecting the sky. I told myself it was compression error. I told myself I needed sleep. Instead, I built a spreadsheet. Columns, time, location, activity. I started logging every flicker of his porch light, every garbage can he moved. By the end of the week, I had a pattern. 2:13 a.m., 3:47 a.m., sometimes both. Always alone. Always returning with hands clean. Not carrying anything. Like he'd put something down rather than brought something back. That week, 2 neighbors complained on the HOA board about packages that never arrived. Katie typed sympathetic replies, pasted USPS claim links, and said, Let's all be vigilant. Graham chimed in with a reminder about security cameras. No one mentioned that the only street in town with a zero-crime brag on the HOA flyer was suddenly losing mail. I wanted confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind, so I walked down to old Mr. Whitaker's place on the corner. He'd been here since the 70s, long enough to know every roof that had been patched twice and every family that had vanished after a foreclosure. He was trimming his rose bushes with garden scissors that looked older than me. "You hear that hum at night?" I asked. My voice sounded younger than I wanted, like I was tattling. "From Aldridge's driveway," he smirked without looking up. "That one's been humming since before he bought the place. These houses back in the Cold War, some of them had storm shelters, bomb bunkers. City sold the plans off in the 90s. Most filled in. Maybe he didn't. He clipped a bud. Or maybe he did something better with it." That night I sat in front of my dash cam again. At 3:12, the figure returned. Graham, for sure. He walked up his drive and in the space of a second frame, gone. Not left or right, just erased. My stomach flipped like I'd seen a card trick but knew it had been filmed on my camera, my angle, my proof. Rewatching, I saw something I'd missed before. A faint shine along the expansion joint near the garage, like oil or lubricant. When the sensor light blinked on, the sheen glistened metallic. The next morning, the mail truck misdelivered an envelope into my box. Return address? Aldwell Civil Contractors. Inside was a plastic card the color of hospital walls, with a magnetic strip and no name. I froze. Halfway between neighborly duty and felony. My thumb pressed the edge until it hurt. I told myself I'd put it back in his box, but the card slid into my jacket pocket instead, hot like it carried a charge. That evening at the HOA potluck, Katie offered me casserole and small talk. Graham showed up late, smelling faintly of bleach under his cologne. He greeted me with a pat on the back that felt too casual for a man who'd filed a ticket against me a week before. "Settling in?" he asked, teeth white as chalk lines. I smiled, nodded, said something about work. Inside my pocket, the card burned like it was trying to answer for me. By the time the potluck ended, I had already decided. I'd go to the driveway, not in daylight, not with cameras around, but in the storm that was rolling across the horizon. The thunder was a drumline announcing cover. The rain would blur lenses. The hum would mask my footsteps. My stomach had that drop ride sensation, the sick thrill of knowing I wasn't turning back. Near midnight, the rain cracked open and poured. I pulled on a hoodie, crossed the street barefoot so my shoes wouldn't betray me, and stepped onto the warm concrete. The surface steamed against the cold rain. The hum wasn't muffled now. It was vibrating through my bones. My hand found the hairline seam Whitaker's roses had warned me about. I traced it, and under the water slick I felt a groove, not random, not cracked, engineered. And then, movement. The slab shifted a fraction of an inch. Not from my weight, but from inside. I jerked back, heart choking me. And in the gap of a blink, I saw it. Blackness below, stairs dropping into a cavity. The smell of industrial bleach and warm metal wafted up. Then the slab sealed, seamless, humming steady like nothing had happened. I staggered off into the rain, chest rattling. At my door, dripping, I almost convinced myself it was a hallucination. But when I stripped off the wet hoodie, the pocket sagged heavy with the plastic card. My proof. My invitation. And taped to my front door, pressed flat by the rain, was another note. In the same careful block print. "You look too long at the floor and eventually it opens." I told myself all day I wouldn't go back, that I'd hand the card to Katie, or better yet, mail it anonymously to the police. But the card burned through my pocket like a fever. Every time I touched it, I felt a tug. Not like temptation exactly, but like obligation. Like once you've been given a key, you're already halfway through the door. That evening, Maya called. She asked how the house was, how the street was treating me. I nearly told her everything, but when I opened my mouth, all that came out was, "Fine." She narrowed her eyes on the screen like she could read the static behind me. "Don't pick a fight with your neighbors," she said softly. "You've been there, what, 2 weeks? You can still start clean." I nodded, but I already knew there was no clean start anymore. The storm broke just after midnight. Perfect cover. I slipped outside, heart thudding louder than the rain. The cul-de-sac glistened under streetlights, puddles rippling with every drop. Graham's house was dark, his driveway glimmering wet. The hum was louder now, steady, mechanical, almost alive. I crossed barefoot again, crouched low, rain soaking the hood of my sweatshirt. The seam was still there, a darker line across the concrete. My fingers found the thin groove, and I slid the plastic card over it. Nothing. I tried pressing the card flat. Still nothing. But when I stepped back, the ground shuddered. The slab exhaled heat, then lowered with a hydraulic hiss. A slice of yellow light cut upward, sharp as a blade, and stairs appeared beneath. The smell hit first. Bleach, yes, But beneath it something metallic and stale, like batteries and rust. My instinct screamed to run, but my legs carried me down, step after step, into a throat of concrete. The staircase ended in a chamber that could have been a basement if basements came with ventilation ducts, big enough to crawl through. Fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead, matching the driveway's heartbeat. To the left, shelves, neat as a library. To the right, metal cabinets with labels written in the same careful block print as the notes I'd been receiving. My own last name leapt out at me from one drawer. I couldn't stop myself. I yanked it open. Inside, photocopies of my mortgage documents, screenshots of my credit history, a printout of the traffic ticket I'd gotten 3 years ago and paid off, and on top of the pile, a fresh sheet, a photo of me last night, standing on his driveway in the rain. I staggered back. Other drawers bore the names of neighbors. I recognized the family at the corner, the young couple with the bikes, even Whitaker, all of them cataloged. Lives in folders. I forced myself forward. A corkboard hung on the wall, a map of our street with red pushpins scattered across it. Some pins had sticky notes. Noise complaint, yard violation, unpaid fees. At the center, written bold in black marker, incidents. The hum deepened suddenly, like the walls themselves had inhaled. Then footsteps above, heavy and slow. The slab was closing. Panic jolted me. I ducked behind a shelf just as the metal door at the bottom of the stairs screeched open. Graham stepped down, rain dripping from his jacket, flashlight beam slicing the room. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. I knew curiosity would get you, he said evenly, voice bouncing off the concrete. He walked past the drawers like a priest through pews. They always tell me I'm paranoid, but when rules fail, people fail. This, he swept the flashlight across the shelves, is accountability. I tried to stay silent, pressed between cold metal and colder fear, but my breath betrayed me, fogging in the beam. His light snapped to me. You, he said. You can help me. You see what happens when neighbors don't respect order? You've already tasted it. The chalk, the list. Now you can choose. Stay blind or stand beside me. Everyone here needs watching. And you, he smiled thinly. You'd be good at it. Before I could answer, a drop of water splashed onto the floor from above, then another. The storm was flooding the entry, water trickling down the stairs. Graham cursed, grabbed a wrench from the wall, and twisted a valve on a pump that roared to life. The floor trembled. And that's when I saw it. A folder on a nearby desk, half open, labeled in thick black letters. Lena. Confidential. My pulse spiked. The name meant nothing to me, but the folder's position, front and center, unlike the others, screamed importance. I lunged for it before I could stop myself. Graham's flashlight beam caught me mid-grab. What are you doing? His voice dropped the calm, replaced by raw fury. Water kept dripping. Faster now, pooling on the concrete. The pump groaned. My fingers clutched the folder. And Graham took a step toward me, face lit from below by the harsh fluorescent glow, looking less like a neighbor and more like a warden whose prisoner had just rattled the bars. The folder was heavier than it should have been, stuffed with papers, USB drives, even a cassette tape in a cracked plastic case. My knuckles whitened around it as Graham's flashlight blinded me. Put that down, he barked. The calm, controlled enforcer mask was gone. His voice cracked under the weight of something personal. I backed toward the shelves, water soaking through my sneakers as it spread across the floor. The pump whined like it was fighting for air. Who's Lena? I demanded, louder than I meant to, voice bouncing against concrete. His face twitched. Not your concern. The folder nearly slipped from my wet hands, but I clutched it tighter. You've got dirt on everyone here. Why is she different? Why's her name written like a headline? He took another step, eyes burning. I said put it down. Something in his tone told me Lena wasn't just another neighbor. She was the crack in his armor, the reason this bunker existed at all. And if I let him close the distance, he'd tear the folder from me before I saw a word. I spun, scattering papers into the rising water. Photos floated out. Grainy shots of a young woman, dark hair, tired eyes, standing at the edge of Graham's driveway. Another photo of her at the community pool, circled in red marker. And one more. Her mailbox open, an envelope inside, with a sticky note stuck to the corner. Probation. My stomach turned. This wasn't about safety. This was surveillance so obsessive it bordered on possession. Graham dropped the flashlight, lunged, and shoved me against the filing cabinet. My shoulder cracked into steel, folder spilling. You don't understand, he growled. His breath reeked of coffee and bleach. She was supposed to listen. She didn't. People get hurt when they stop listening. I shoved him back with everything I had. His boot slipped in the spreading water and he crashed into the pump. For a moment the hum sputtered and the lights flickered, shadows jerking across the walls. That was when I saw the rest of the shelves. Drawer after drawer labeled with names of neighbors. Each one not just files, but evidence bags, keys, license plate frames, even little trinkets like spare lighters or receipts. He wasn't just watching. He was collecting pieces of everyone, trophies cataloged into order. Accountability? I spat, chest heaving. This is blackmail. You're hoarding people's lives down here. Graham scrambled up, wet hair plastered to his forehead. His voice rose with the storm above. No one else will do it. Katie doesn't care. The cops don't care. The HOA is toothless. Someone has to keep the system clean. By terrorizing people? By making sure they know they're seen. His eyes shone like he believed it, like he thought he was saving us. Another cascade of water poured down the stairs, ankle deep now, swirling papers into pulpy sludge. The pump choked and screeched. Graham cursed, yanking a lever, but the flood didn't stop. I snatched one of the USB drives from the folder, slipping it into my pocket. Insurance, evidence, something. He noticed, eyes narrowing. You don't walk out of here with that. Try and stop me, I said, but my voice cracked. He grabbed a crowbar from a hook and swung, not at me, but at the floor grate, trying to clear the pump. The metal clanged like thunder. I darted for the stairs, water sloshing around my legs. He shouted after me, but his voice was drowned by the roar of the storm and the grinding of failing machinery. At the top step, I glanced back. He stood waist-deep in murky water, clutching the crowbar, eyes burning holes through me. Not afraid, not desperate, convicted. You think you're exposing me, he shouted. But you'll thank me when you realize what they all are capable of. You'll see I was right. The slab above shuddered. The hydraulic system whined, struggling against the pressure of water. My chance to get out was closing. I shoved my shoulder into the rising door, squeezing through the narrowing gap, scraping my back raw on concrete. Rain slapped my face as I emerged into the night air, lungs drinking freedom. The driveway sealed behind me with a hiss. The hum quieted. For a second, it was just rain, wind, and my own hammering pulse. But my pocket was heavy with the USB drive, and when I pulled it out in the glow of the streetlight, scratched letters on the side made my blood run cold. LENA-FINAL. The rain didn't let up. It hammered the cul-de-sac like it wanted to erase the street altogether. I staggered back across the asphalt, water sloshing in my sneakers, clutching the USB drive so tight the ridges bit into my palm. Every instinct screamed to run into my house, lock the door, and pretend none of this existed. But the bunker beneath me throbbed with sound, and I couldn't shake the image of Graham waist-deep in rising water, fighting his machines like a man who would rather drown than let go. I barely made it to my porch when the ground beneath Graham's driveway shuddered again. A low, metallic groan, then a muffled bang. A geyser of foul-smelling water blasted out of a side vent near his garage, spraying across the lawn. The storm was overwhelming his system. I should have called 911. I even had my phone in my hand. But then I saw movement, the slab splitting, not rising neatly this time, but jerking, grinding like the hydraulics were choking. A gush of water spilled up the stairs, and there was Graham, shoving against the flood with his crowbar like he could beat it back into the earth. For a second, I just watched. He looked less like the tyrant who'd cataloged everyone's sins and more like a man cornered by his own obsession. Then he spotted me through the spray. His face twisted, not in fear, not in shame, but in raw defiance. "Help me!" he shouted. His voice cracked under the storm. "If this fills, the whole block will know. You want that?" The irony almost made me laugh. He was drowning in his own secret and still thought exposure was worse than death. I hesitated too long. The water surged again, slamming him back into the stairwell. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the memory of those photos of Lena, circled in red. Maybe it was the simple fact that I couldn't watch a man die, even if he'd made himself a monster. I sprinted back across the street. The concrete was slick under my knees as I reached the opening. "Give me your hand," I yelled. He dropped the crowbar, lunged, and our palms locked. His grip was iron, nails digging into my skin, eyes wild. He wasn't begging. He was bargaining. "You don't tell them," he gasped. "You don't tell anyone. You help me. You're part of this now." The flood surged again. My legs braced, back screaming as I hauled him up. He slipped, dragged me half in, cold water slapping my chest. I thought we'd both go under until I saw, just beside the stairwell, a rusted lever set into the wall, painted red, almost hidden under grime. I let go of him with one hand, slammed the lever down. Somewhere below, metal ground against metal, then a whoosh as a hatch burst open. The water found an escape, rushing into an unseen tunnel with a roar like a subway train. Graham collapsed against the step, coughing, clutching the rail. We sat there for a moment, soaked, panting, the storm easing into drizzle overhead. His eyes met mine, something shifting in them. Not gratitude, never that, but calculation. "You saw too much," he rasped. I shoved myself up, slipping on the wet concrete, backing toward open air. "I saw enough." Before he could answer, another siren cut through the night. Not the pump, not the storm, police. Blue and red lights smeared across the wet street as a cruiser rounded the corner. Graham froze, jaw tight. I realized he hadn't called them. Someone else had. Maybe Whitaker. Maybe Katie. Finally tired of covering, I backed further, clutching the USB drive in my pocket. Graham's driveway hissed, trying to seal itself again, but the hydraulics stuttered, grinding like a dying animal. The cops were seconds away. And in that moment, standing in the rain, between the bunker that shouldn't exist and the flashing lights closing in, I realized I had a choice. Hand them everything and let the truth burn through this street, or keep the darkest parts to myself. The pieces that would gut neighbors who didn't even know they'd been watched. Graham straightened, water dripping from his jacket, his face hardening into that same mask he wore at HOA meetings. The mask of control. The mask of a man who thought he was untouchable. "You don't know what's on that drive?" he said quietly. "You don't want to." And then the officers were there, flashlights cutting through the mist, shouting for us to step away from the driveway. I stepped back, my fist tight around the USB like it was the last match in a dark tunnel. And I couldn't stop hearing his words. "You don't want to." The police cordoned off the driveway within minutes, their radios crackling, beams of light sweeping across Graham's perfect lawn like searchlights over a crime scene. One officer tried the slab with his boot, but the hydraulics had locked it again, seamless, as if nothing had ever been there. Graham played dumb, hands raised, voice calm, talking about drainage issues and malfunctioning pumps. He was good at it, too. He sounded like a man explaining away a clogged gutter. They questioned me separately. I stood dripping on my own porch, arms crossed tight, the USB hidden in my pocket like a hot coal. I thought about pulling it out right there, handing it over, letting the system chew him up, but my mind flashed to the folders I'd seen. Neighbors' secrets, photos, debts, mistakes. If I gave them everything, it wouldn't just ruin him. It would scorch the whole street. So I told them about the noise, the flooding, how Graham almost drowned in his basement. I kept my words clipped, half-truths polished with exhaustion. Sergeant Morales gave me a long look, one that said he didn't buy all of it but couldn't push without evidence. He left me with a card. "If you remember something," he said, "you call." When they drove off, Graham was still standing in the rain, arms folded again, eyes locked on me. Not rage, not fear, just a promise. Inside, I dried off, but the chill never left. I booted up my laptop, slid the USB in. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me prayed it would be empty, corrupted, anything. But folders bloomed across the screen, names labeled one by one, and there she was again, Lena. The videos were grainy, audio scratchy, but her voice was clear. Tired, pleading. She was talking to Graham, begging him to stop following her, to let her move out without interference. He accused her of lying, of breaking rules no one else enforced but him. In one recording, she shouted, "You can't own people just because you watch them." Then silence. Then only his breathing. My stomach turned. The last file was labeled Final. It was shorter, just minutes. Her voice cracked, trembling, telling him she was leaving the state, and his cold and clipped, "Then you're already gone." The recording ended mid-sentence. I shut the laptop. My reflection stared back in the black screen, pale and shaking. When Maya visited the next weekend, I tried to act normal. She saw through it instantly. Over dinner, she said, "You're not yourself. What's happening here?" I told her pieces. Enough to make her pale, not enough to make her bolt. She listened, hands tight around her glass. "Evan, you have to report this. If you keep it, you're part of it." But I couldn't. Not all of it. Some files were petty, affairs, debts, whispered arguments caught on cheap recorders. Things that would destroy families if exposed. Graham wanted power through fear. I couldn't give him power again by detonating the truth indiscriminately. So I made copies. I sent the Lena files and the evidence of stolen mail to Morales in an anonymous package. I deleted the rest, or at least I thought I did. The neighborhood changed after that. Cops came back, this time with warrants. They dug into his property, found structural violations, unlicensed equipment, enough to drag him into hearings for months. Katie resigned from the HOA, citing stress. People whispered now when they passed me, glances flicking toward Graham's house, but no one asked questions. No one wanted to know how deep the hole went. Weeks later, a plain envelope showed up in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single object. A black key fob, scratched but functional, with one word etched into the metal tag, B2. There was no note, no explanation, just that. I turned it over in my hand, The rain starting again outside, and for the first time since I moved here, I wondered if Graham had been telling the truth in one way. Maybe what I saw wasn't all there was. Maybe the driveway wasn't the only entrance. And maybe the list wasn't finished.